Hi there, here we are with another A-level maths video. This is the Pure Maths Year 1 content. We've started to look at Chapter 2 and we're looking at Section 2.1, reminding ourselves about particular methods for solving quadratic equations. Now, I'm sure you remember what a quadratic equation is, but just a reminder, if we have an equation with an x squared term in it, so it's of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, then we call that a quadratic equation. Also, if we can rearrange the equation to be that form, we call it a quadratic equation. Here's a word which you may or may not be familiar with. The solutions of any equation are sometimes known as the roots of the equation. So when we talk about finding the roots of the equation, we really just mean solving that equation. And when it comes to quadratic equations, one method, which I'm sure you're familiar with already, is we can use factorisation to solve a quadratic equation. So I'd like you to have a go at the question on the screen just to remind yourself about how that works. Factorise the quadratic expression that's there, and then use that answer to find the roots or solve that quadratic equation. Okay, so let's make sure we can remember how these work. So here's the expression that we've got here, and we need to factorize this. Now, you could do this one by inspection, or of course, you could use the method we looked at in a previous video for factorizing. Let's just remind ourselves about what that method was. So if I take the 3 here, which is the coefficient of x squared, multiply it by the -8, I get -24. And I need to find two numbers which multiply together to make that -24, and which add together to make the x coefficient here, which is -2. Okay, so if you use this method, you will already have worked out that those two numbers will be -6 and 4. If we multiply those two numbers together, we get -24. We add them together, we get -2. So what I'm going to do now is I will write the -2x here. I'll split it up into a -6x and a +4x. I'm going to end up with 3x squared minus 6x plus 4x, and then that -8 is still hanging around. And the reason I've done this is so that I can take these first two terms. I can do a bit of factorizing here, and I think it becomes this. And then I can do the same thing with the last two terms, which I think become this. And then finally, I can see x minus 2 is a factor of both of these expressions here, both of these terms. So we can take x minus 2 out as a factor, and then I'm going to end up with 3x plus 4 as the other factor. So there we factorized it. Let me just bring that back down so we can see that a bit more clearly. Okay. And of course, what we now need to do is we need to use this factorization to solve where that whole thing equals 0. And the trick here, if you remember, is that when we have two numbers multiplying to get the answer 0, well, there's two situations where that can give us the answer 0. One situation is if that first number here, in this particular case x minus 2, equals 0, then 0 times anything will give us the answer 0, right? And the other situation is if the 3x plus 4, the other number, equals 0, because anything times 0 gives us the answer 0. So just quickly solving these here, if x minus 2 equals 0 would lead us to one root of the equation, which is x equals 2. And then if we deal with this one here, rearranging that, I think we end up with -4/3 as our second root of our quadratic equation. Did you get it right? Okay, so that is a method which you definitely do need to know how to do. You need to know how to factorize quadratics and solve equations using it. However, there is another method which I'm sure most of you will probably have seen before as well, which is there's a nice formula called the quadratic formula, which will just tell us the answer straight away. It's on the screen there. I'm sure it looks familiar to you. So, do you remember how this formula works? Well, let's test that and have a go at the question on this screen now. I'll pause the video for you to stop it and have a go at it and restart once you've got your answers. So how did you get on with this one then? Well, let's see if we can work out what's going on with this. So if you remember the way this works, we need to work out the values of a, b, and c to substitute into the formula. And those are just the coefficients of the x squared term, the x term, and the constant term, respectively. So our value of a here would be 2. Our value of b here would be the -5. And our value of c here would be 1. And then we're just going to substitute those numbers into the quadratic formula. So we end up with minus b, which is minus -5, plus or minus, remember this leads us to our two solutions or our two roots, because we take each of these individually, but let's get the rest of it written down as well. So b squared minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 1. And this is all over 2 lots of a, and a is 2 there. Okay, so now it's just a case of working out, simplifying down what that becomes. So the minus and -5 becomes 5, plus or minus. If you work out what's under the square root sign here, -5 squared is a positive 25. 4 times 2 times 1 is 8. And of course 2 times 2 is 4. So 25 minus 8 becomes 17 underneath that square root sign there. And we've got our solutions here. Now we were asked to keep the roots in an exact form, so I'm not going to get my calculator, I'm not going to work out what that is as a decimal, but what I will do is I'll just write down the two roots separately. So we've got x equals 5 plus root 17 all over 4, and x equals 5 minus root 17 all over 4 are the two roots of the equation in an exact form. Now, you do need to know that quadratic formula. If you haven't already memorized that, then you will need to memorize that formula. It's so important that we just need to know it. It's not going to be given to us in any formula book or anything like that in the exam. However, there are certain quadratic equations which we might not need to use the formula or factorizing, because we may just be able to rearrange the equation to get our roots straight away. Let me show you an example of the kind of thing I'm talking about here. On the screen I've got an example which I'm just going to go through quickly to show you what I mean. So here we go then. Here's the equation, x minus 2 all squared equals 5. Now you might be tempted to expand all this out and then sort of put it in a more standard form to use either the formula or try to factorize it. But I'm going to sort of show you how we could do this particular one much more easily here. All we need to do is just find what x is. So I can just rearrange the equation and find out what x is almost directly here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to deal with the squared bit here by taking the square root of both sides of the equation. So the x minus 2 squared, but square rooted again takes us back to x minus 2. And on the right hand side we're going to have the square root of 5. But I do need to be careful here because I need to remember that when I take the square root of both sides of an equation, we could end up with a positive or the negative root on one side of the equation here. So if you think about it, if we square the positive root 5, we get 5 again, but if we square the negative root 5, we get 5 again here. So I do need to remember that plus or minus. Now, providing I remember the plus or minus, the next bit is easy. Add 2 to both sides, and I have my solutions here. So my roots of this particular equation are going to be x equals 2 plus root 5 and x equals 2 minus root 5. How easy was that? Okay, so on the screen now is one for you to have a go at, which I think you can use that same method I've just used here. You don't need to expand anything out, you can just rearrange the equation to get your roots. Have a go at it and restart the video when you're done. Okay then, so how did you get on with this? Let me just quickly go through the steps here. So what we need to do here, let's just take the square root of both sides. X plus 7 equals, now the square root of 9 is of course 3, but I do need to remember that plus or minus. Hopefully you didn't forget the plus or minus. Subtract 7 from both sides, and we're going to end up with -7 plus or minus 3 as our two roots. So that must mean that x could be, well, -7 plus 3 is going to be -4, and the other solution, the other root, is going to be -7 minus 3, which gives us -10 there. Hopefully you agree with me. So please do watch out for that little trick. You know, sometimes you can save yourself quite a lot of work. Now you'll see I've got the calculator emulator on the screen because I want to show you one last thing before we finish up this video. You can use your calculator to just tell you the answers as well. There's a wonderful equation solving feature on the calculator which I'm going to demonstrate by kind of redoing one of the questions we did earlier on. So I'm going to solve this equation. Now we solved it earlier on using the formula and we've got our answers here. But let me show you how it works on the calculator here. So we need to go to the menu, and we need to go down to, I think it's option A here, which is this one here. There it is. The equation option is in there. It equals. And we want to solve a polynomial equation. So quadratic equations are a form of polynomial equation of degree 2. And the reason it's degree 2 is because the highest power of x is a squared, and x to the power 2. So we need to choose polynomial degree 2, and then we just put the details in. So our coefficient here is going to be 2x squared minus 5x plus 1. So let's put that in here. 2 is the x squared coefficient, negative 5 for the x coefficient, and 1 for the constant term. Okay, and then hit equals again, and there it's given us the solution, or one of the roots at least, 5 plus root 17 over 4, which was one of the ones we got. If you look at the paper, we saw one of those here already. And then if we hit equals a second time, it tells us the second root of the equation. So why don't you have a go at using your calculator to solve a quadratic equation? I've got quite a complicated one here. The numbers are a little bit awkward, so I think this is a perfect one to sort of just go to our calculator and see if we can use our calculator here. See if you can remember what I did. Rewatch the video if you need to, but have a go at it yourself and restart the video once you've got your answer. Okay, then let's see if I can just do it on the calculator as well and see if we agree. So we want in this position here, the A is 17. So let's get that in here, 17. The B was, I believe, 32. Hold on a second. So negative 32, in fact, here. So let's just try that again, negative 32. And then, oh, hold on, what's going on? Okay, that's done what I wanted it to do. Fantastic. Okay, and the C was 7, so I need to just put a 7 in this position. Okay, and hit equals, and so we've got our answer here, 16 plus the square root of 137 over 17, or 16 minus the square root of 137 over 17. Hopefully you agreed with me. And there we are at the end of the video. So I do want to just point out that even though your calculator can do these things for you, you must learn how to do it by hand yourself. There's going to be situations where we need to know these techniques. We can't rely on the calculator to be able to do everything for us here. So calculators are a really useful tool, but you must know how to factorize, you must know how to use the formula, and also try and recognize those other situations as well. Okay, but that's the end of this video. There's some consolidation exercises if you want a bit more practice on this stuff. We'll do a bit more quadratic work in the next video, but I'll see you then.